If you like this video, make sure to subscribe to Downfall Network for more cool content. What's up, everyone? Thralls here once again. I'm Necrotic, and I have a collection update for you. Got a nice stack of stuff I got in record stores and in the mail, and I actually have two here that were covered by John in the What's John Jamming segment that they actually gave me as well, and I'm going to give you my thoughts on those as well. So, let's just get right into this. Shards of Humanity, Cold Logic. Now, I didn't know this band was still around. Actually, this is their first release in 6 years. This came out on Unspeakable Acts, I believe, earlier this year, like maybe May or April. And this is awesome, very technical death thrash. And it's really interesting how it kind of ebbs and flows between both of those styles. Like sometimes you get tracks that are decidedly more thrash. There's some ones on here that really reminded me of Megadeth a lot, especially in terms of the riff structure and the hooks. And then some of it is way more towards the side of like early Death and Possessed. Really solid songwriting on here too. The opening instrumental, Cosmic Shield, is fantastic. But I have to say, Docile Masses and Demonic Crystallized Intelligence are two of my particular favorites. Demonic Crystallized Intelligence actually has like a really cool jazzy breakdown. And man, there is a lot of scorching lead work on here. And the lead tone is just way up in the mix, so there's no missing them. But overall, I think it's a pretty solid release. I definitely really dig this, and I was really surprised to see that these guys are still around. So definitely looking out for more from these guys, and hopefully when shows are a thing again, get a chance to see them live. Either way, check this out. It's pretty solid stuff. Witchcraft, Black Metal. Now, the title is definitely deceptive there, and I'll be honest, so is the name. This is just Magnus Pelliner just doing a solo thing, but he called it Witchcraft for whatever reason. I don't understand why he didn't put it under Magnus Pelliner. He's released solo albums before, I believe. He's the only one on this album. It's just him and acoustic guitar, and he is like the saddest, mopiest minstrel on the planet on this. And now, while I like sullen acoustic numbers, this is an entire album full of very, very long ones, and there is really no instrumentation outside of the acoustic guitar, maybe like some keyboards in the background. And Magnus is a solid singer, but I just don't understand this release. Like, where's the rest of the band? What happened? Was there a massive split? They had some solid albums before this. I really enjoyed Nucleus, and I believe Legend was the one before that, which I really enjoyed. I don't know why this album is the way it is. And unfortunately, even for this, kind of like a little acoustic number, the tone on this never changes. Like, it almost feels like one continued song about something very depressing. I'm just kind of confounded by this. I don't think it's necessarily bad. It's just not what I expected at all. But I don't know. Let me know your thoughts on this one, because this is kind of a head scratcher for me, just as far as releases in general. Like, why did this happen? I don't know. Anyway, still check it out, form your own opinion. I didn't really get into it, but you might. 16, Zoloft Smile. I've been getting more into this band here lately, and I realized there's some releases I didn't have, and this one came out in 2002 on Bastardized Recordings. I don't know if that's the original label it was released on, but I really like this one. This one's a little bit different than at least their more recent ones. The vocals are less distorted, and I have to say the music feels closer to bands like Helmet and Unsane, and even a band like Snapcase a bit. The delivery is almost like a spoken word. The production here, I think, is really good. Like, this sludgy tone is awesome. And I think the sludgy tone is really what keeps it sludge. Most of it kind of feels like very mid-tempo hardcore. But I really enjoyed this release. I've enjoyed pretty much every release I've heard from them. And I own, I think, 5 albums by them now. Still some more to get, I believe. But definitely check this band out. I mean, if you're into, like, sludge and hardcore and, like, I guess heavy alternative metal or whatever this is, definitely check it out. It's a good time. Cemetery Filth, Dominion. This came out this year on Unspeakable Acts Records. This is the band's full-length debut, and this is just some straight-up old-school death metal. I have to say, it was a little odd at the start because the opening guitar riff shows off a different tone than I think that's on the rest of the album. It sounds a little bit more thrashy, and then all of a sudden it gets a lot murkier. I don't know if it was like just a mixing issue there. But this is just some really cool old school death metal. Like, definitely a fierce, like, early Morbid Angel vibe, and like some more like thrashy stuff like Pestilence. Not overly technical, just about groove and intensity. Kind of has a little bit of a Repulsion vibe in some spots when it gets a little like extra gritty and thrashy. Solid release. There's a lot of other really good death metal bands coming out right now, and this kind of is just in that pack. Like, I got to listen to this a little bit more. It really didn't jump out of me immediately, but I do like it. And if you like old school death metal, I definitely recommend it. So, of course, check it out. Exocrine Maelstrom. This is a tech death / progressive death metal band from France. Kind of similar to Gorod. This came out last month on Unique Leader Records, and musicianship-wise, this is very impressive. The mix, though, I think is absolutely so sterile. It is so processed and too polished, especially for death metal. There's almost every bit of grit removed on this. Now again, these guys are very impressive musicians. Drumming is fantastic on here, though I think the bass drum's definitely too clicky, but you kind of run into that in tech death. And the guitar work is phenomenal. These guys can definitely play. It's just sort of constructing songs with like hooks that last. And they throw in a lot of just extra effects and synths, and there's even a saxophone on here, which I think ever since Rivers now threw a sax in one of their songs, it's pretty much become kind of a thing like, hey, can we get away with a horn section? Not so much here. It kind of just feels forced and kind of tacked on, and when the album feels very overproduced already, it really just kind of becomes one more thing like, did you really need that? But overall, I mean, I don't think they're necessarily a bad band. It's just really not what I'm into. Like, this is so overproduced to the point where I'm not entirely sure they could replicate every little nuanced sound live. It just seems like tech death generated by a computer. Still, I mean, if you like progressive metal and tech death, I definitely recommend checking it out. You know, one thing about prog metal and tech death is musicianship is always on point, and there are no slouches there. I just didn't get into it that much just because, you know, it's a little too overproduced and a little too aimless at times for me. Still, again, check it out though. Forgotten Tomb, Nihilistic Estrangement. I've been going back and listening to more of this band's stuff here lately, and this album is fantastic. I think this is an interesting blend of a lot of different styles, but it really seems to work. Right away, the opener, Active Shooter, the opening riff reminds me so much of Carcass's Buried Dreams, but when the lead melody comes in, it turns into like Blackened Alice in Chains. There's like this bluesy kind of rock vibe to some of these lead melodies. There's even some slide guitar in here. But the tone of the album is really interesting. It still stays very dark and depressive, but it has kind of this doom metal, black metal meets kind of just like blues rock vibe in some spots. And then it'll even shift gears to like kind of classic goth rock. Like there's moments in here that remind me of like Sisters of Mercy. And then there's just some straight up black metal moments on here. The last track, RBMK, is probably the most straightforward black metal track on here. This band is really doing a good job of blending a lot of styles, but keeping it very interesting. I really, really enjoyed this release. And I definitely need to get more Forgotten Tomb. There's still some albums I'm missing, and I want to hear kind of more of their progression towards this sound, because their earlier stuff is a lot different than this. But this is still remarkably good. Definitely check this out. This is a really interesting listen. Unconsecrated. Unconsecrated Cemetery / Dark Awakening. Now this is a reissue of 2 unreleased demos on Dan's Crypt Records, which, alright, Dan's got a crypt, that's cool. This band's from Spain, and these demos came out in 2006 and 2007, and honestly, it's kind of hard to tell the break in between the demos, but they have similar recording. I think maybe the drums on the second demo sound a little bit different, not as good. And there's a little bit of issue with like dynamic range in terms of like some songs sound louder than others. Overall, very old school death metal sound. You know, Morbid Angel, Pestilence, Autopsy, Morgoth, stuff like that. Very thrashy in sections, lots of sludgy atmosphere, some cool D-beat breaks. I will say that some songs kind of drag on and hang on to parts for too long. But overall, this is some pretty solid stuff. I definitely want to check out more of their stuff, but I don't think they have much else outside of these demos. There might be some EPs or such, but not a bad release, and they actually sound pretty good for demos. They may have been tweaked with in the studio, but they do sound pretty raw, so I think that's pretty much just the way they were. Either way, definitely check this out. Man, it's fun, gritty, old-school death metal, and who doesn't love that? Check it out. Demonical. Darkness Unbound. It's a straight up Swedish death metal, pretty much, you know, bloodbath and dismember worship. It came out in 2013 on Metal Blade / Cyclone Empire. And yeah, it's pretty much just as advertised there. Very raw but polished production, and of course you get that lovely Swedish guitar tone, the big buzzsaw sound. The drummer of this band actually spent time in Grave, Sentinex, and Entombed AD, so he's pretty much got a good feel for this, I would assume. Pretty solid release. I think there was only one track in here. I thought they kind of dragged too long, but most of this is very high energy. Again, very much like Bloodbath, I guess, like circa the Fathomless Mastery, I would say. And there's really not much to say about it. I mean, just saying it's Swedish death metal, you pretty much have an idea of what it sounds like. So if you already like that sort of thing, you know, Bloodbath and so on, definitely check this out because this is some nice high energy death metal. Check it out. Infernal Coil, Within a Forgotten World. This came out in 2018 on Profound Lore Records, and I kind of slept on this one. I wasn't sure about it. I heard a couple of tracks on YouTube, and I was like, man, that is some insane sounding shit. But I actually decided to go out and buy it. I've heard enough hype about it. I was like, no, I'm going to hear the full album, and oh, man, this is quite the album, both in good and bad ways. This is a mix of death metal, black metal, grindcore, maybe some post-metal, could be war metal too, because there are war metal moments on here in terms of just the overall dissonance and the wall of sound. Like, even the quiet moments aren't quiet. They just pump up the atmosphere with just all sorts of ambient noise in the background. Now, it does deliver some like cool, catchy death metal riffs here and there, but there is a wall of just dissonance and what I assume is torture going on in the background. This is an insane listen. This is caustic and just nasty. Like, this is some of the most unwelcoming music I've heard in a while. If you're looking for something that is just truly insane sounding, that is pretty much the only thing I could describe this as, is just pure insanity. Definitely check this out. If this is not your thing, I mean, I totally get it. This is a challenging listen. Either way, though, hopefully I generated enough curiosity with this one, but yeah, definitely check it out. Sarcophago, Laws of Scourge. This originally came out in 1991. This is the 2007 reissue on Cogumuelo Records. That's probably not how it's pronounced. This is awesome blackened thrash / death thrash, I guess, in spots. This is definitely different than their debut. I don't own their debut, but I've definitely listened to it plenty of times. I never actually sat down and listened to this one, and this is definitely like that musical leap forward where things got a little bit more refined, a little bit more polished. There's a little bit more about songwriting dynamics. Didn't really lose any of the rage and any of that just fast, thrashy, nasty, blackened thrash that they do. But I think the main focus of this one was more about songwriting and attention to melody and hooks, and they crafted a nice balance between, you know, melody and brutality. And this was sort of what they were teasing on the Rotting EP, but this is just a fantastic release. I absolutely love it. And I can't believe I've kind of slept on getting Sarcophago releases. It's just so many other things on my radar, they kind of slipped under it. Either way, if you've never jammed Sarcophago, this is a killer album right here. I'd say jam most of their discography. Some of the stuff towards the end is a little rough, but definitely check this out. Imperative Music Compilation Volume 9. Now, I was actually cleaning up down here and I found this in a sealed package, and this must have been from a Metalhead box, and I totally forgot about it, and I never actually got a chance to listen to it. And this is a compilation of a lot of underground bands from all across the world. So definitely a lot of Brazilian bands on here, but it is pretty much all over. You have Switzerland, Japan, the Netherlands, United Kingdom, and of course some in the US. But the US ones are kind of interesting in the sense that they're just Relapse Records bands. Namely, they have Death Leprosy, which they were using that to promote the reissues, which this came out in 2015. That kind of puts it right around that time when those were out, or at least not too long after. And then Cretan with their song It off of their last album, which was absolutely killer. Now, the rest of these bands are definitely underground, and it's kind of hit or miss on here. Like, it's a wide swath of different styles, and you get like some straight up groove metal, thrash metal. I don't think there was any black metal on here, but there was definitely some death metal. And I actually made some notes of the ones that I got into. Dark Rise, which was just some thrashy death metal on here. Eternal Putrefaction, again, death metal. And then these last three were Brazilian bands. Hecatomic, Infinity Horror, and Land of Tears. Land of Tears I thought was exceptionally good. And again, all these bands really don't have much in the way of releases and such. I was looking up these bands as I was listening to them on Encyclopedia Metallum, or Metallum, whatever it is. And really just not much, other than, you know, the more famous ones. But not a bad comp. There's definitely some cool underground stuff in here, and, you know, you can definitely tell, like, a lot of it is, like, demos and unmastered and such, but still, you know, check it out. I mean, if you can find it, or if you got it in the Metalhead box and you haven't listened to it, check it out. Cynicism, Limb Hymns. Now, this was one of the ones given to us courtesy of a band that Jammin' John actually did in his segment, and they decided to send me a copy too, which is awesome because I really enjoyed this release. These guys, you can tell immediately, love bands like Exhumed and Carcass. There's even a line in one of these songs that actually has the line "Open the Abscess," which I know that's absolutely a reference to Exhumed. Now, the cool thing that they do that kind of makes them stand out a little bit from just straight up Exhumed worship or Carcass worship, which there's a lot of that, but that is not a bad thing, is the fact that the higher vocals, because they do the 2-vocal switch, you know, like Exhumed does and Carcass, between deep and screamed vocals, but the higher vocals almost have like a hardcore or crossover thrash bite to them. And I think that makes the thrashier sections when he's singing sound extra thrashy. Like, it kind of gives it that, like, almost DRI, Cryptic Slaughter sort of vibe. And this band loves puns, apparently, because there's a lot of them on here. We have Organized, Abracadaver, and Kill It to Skill It. I love wordplay like that, and, you know, death metal is so over the top, why not have a sense of humor about it? If you love death grind and straight up death metal and, like, a kind of an old school feel to it, and, of course, just raw, nasty, like, kind of Repulsion-like production, then definitely check this out. This was a fun time. And finally, we have Trow with Monochromacy, or Monochromacy. I don't know. These guys are a black metal band from Portland, Oregon. This is their debut full-length, self-released in 2019. And this is pretty interesting. It's very sludgy black metal. Unfortunately, the production kind of hampers it. It is very compressed. And listening to it and how these songs are constructed, because these guys can definitely write. Like, there's a lot of really great melody and ambience in here. There's a lot of dissection-like parts in there, which I absolutely love. And definitely some stuff that screams Emperor when the keyboards come in. But unfortunately, with the production, this sound feels just so confined, and it kind of deserves that big, lush production. Now, of course, I'm going to give them a pass because it's a self-release and everything. They didn't have, like, the biggest studio or probably the biggest budget or anything like that, and they probably did the best they could, but I think bigger production would have really, really helped it, because it kind of hampers the overall sound, because the sound itself sounds like it would have been huge, and I really, really like the songs on here. Again, great attention to melody, and the fact that it has kind of this sludgy appeal makes me want to hear this, like, really, like, remastered and redone, or just a follow-up album to this with just bigger production, because it deserves some lush production. Either way, definitely check this band out as well, because this was a really solid release. Alright, well, that knocks out another one of these. Gonna remind you guys, we have a CD giveaway going on once we get to 2,000 subs. So, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. Catch you guys later. Thank you for watching.